I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey Lurkers, welcome to this week's episode. Remember, we will be at the Wytheville UFO Festival coming up this Saturday, June 8th, in Wytheville, Virginia. And then the Sasquatch Saturday Festival is at Piney Run Park in Sykesville, Maryland on June 15th, which is the following Saturday. Links to those events are in the show notes. If you happen to be in either of those areas, stop out and say hello. This week we are hitting the trail once again with another installment of the Haunted Trail. We're heading into New York this time, and this is going to be split into two parts. It was too long to be one full episode. It might be a little bit light on part 2, but I felt it was better to split it up into two parts. For those who might be new to the podcast and haven't started from the beginning, the Haunted Trail is a collection of stories from along the Appalachian National Scenic Trail, or the Appalachian Trail, or sometimes just the AT. Also, sometimes it's called the Appalachian Trail, and sometimes it's called the Appalachian Trail. I believe Appalachian is actually the most recognized correct way to say it, and it really just comes down to what part of the East Coast you happen to live in. I say Appalachian. The Appalachian Trail is a national hiking trail located in the eastern part of the United States and is 2,197.4 miles long. The distance changes now and then when new land is acquired to work around towns, highways, or other obstacles. I've been collecting these stories for several years, and I'm continuing to collect them. So if you've had a strange experience from an area near the Appalachian Trail, definitely let me know. The Appalachian Trail travels through 14 states: Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Vermont, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. I don't know if that's the correct order once you get north. Close enough. We've covered stories from Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. So if you haven't listened to those, make sure you check them out. Each state stands on its own, so you don't need to listen to them in order. Though I think it makes for better flow if you do. Last time we left the state of New Jersey, and we're now headed into New York. There are 91.3 miles of the Appalachian Trail in New York. And one of the unique things about the trail in that area is the proximity to New York City. Hikers going through Harriman State Park can actually catch glimpses of the Manhattan skyline. One of the first areas you come to in New York is Greenwood Lake. Not far is the town of Warwick, home to the Demarest Building. Built in 1862 as a national hotel, the Demarest Building was originally designed to help Warwick accommodate the influx of travelers who began passing through after the Warwick Valley Railroad was completed. It was sold in 1885, and shortly after the sale, the building went up in flames. Today it is an office complex which also houses shops and restaurants. Visitors say that they can hear ghostly screams coming from the top of the building, but it is not known exactly who or what is haunting the Demarest. Also in Warwick is Silvio's Italian Villa restaurant. Silvio's is housed in a building that originally dates back to the 1700s, and was originally inhabited by a Revolutionary War veteran, Levi Ellis. The original building was built on land that once belonged to the Mincy Indians. Gilbert Drew later purchased the house in the mid-1800s. Drew constructed the second story of the home and renamed the estate Maple Glen Farm. It was eventually purchased by the Vail family. A member of the Vail family, Roy, was a professional gunsmith and was known for creating and working on guns for many well-known individuals, including Dwight D. Eisenhower. Roy lived in the house while he ran his business from a nearby barn. In 1972, tragedy struck the Vail family when Roy Vail's sister was found murdered. Her death seemed to be without motive, and no one was ever formally charged. Rumors surfaced about Roy's involvement, and 10 years later, Roy Vail walked into what is now known as the Peach Room and took his own life. At this point, the house was sold to Ron Vitello Sr., who made the space into an inn and restaurant. It was later sold to its namesake, Silvio. In the 2 decades of time that Silvio has owned the space, it has provided a place for people to enjoy delicious, authentic Italian food. Now there is a ton of paranormal activity documented at the restaurant. There have been complaints of items disappearing and then reappearing days later. Doors and cabinets open and close on their own. Footsteps are heard, as well as the meow of a cat. Apparitions have been seen on the 2nd floor and in the attic. The presence of a small girl has been felt in the back bedroom. A metal rack in the coat closet started spinning wildly when a priest was called to bless the house. Tales tell of a little girl that haunts the area. She's pretty active when people sit and talk to her, but who exactly she is or why she stayed at the villa is unknown. Aside from that, there are so many different noises that people hear, from voices that are trailing down the hall to objects that are moved without any explanation. Ghosts visiting this space is definitely something that you can count on. The area where Roy Vail killed himself is right where table 24 now sits. Diners who eat at that table talk of strange feelings and noises. After the Greenwood Lake area, the trail travels through Harriman State Park, located in Rockland and Orange counties. It is the 2nd largest park in the park system. It boasts 31 lakes and reservoirs, 200 miles of hiking trails, 2 beaches, 2 public camping areas, a network of group camps, miles of streams and scenic roads, and scores of wildlife species, vistas, and vantage points. Harriman State Park's major facilities include Lakes Welch, Sebago, Tiarati, and Silvermine, the Anthony Wayne Recreation Area, Sebago Cabins, and Beaver Pond campgrounds. People hiking through the park have reported seeing black-robed figures moving in the trees out of the corner of their eye. They also say there is a heavy dark feeling in the woods. But ghosts aren't the only thing within the park, as a group of friends found out while in the area of Lake Tiarati. On Christmas Eve 1966, when 23-year-old Vincent and 2 pals decided to do a little winter fishing. The winter weather was rather temperate for December, so they decided to do their fishing at a spot along the Hudson River, about 40 miles north of New York City. To the east of them on the shore of the Hudson was the Indian Point Nuclear Power Station. On the western shore of the Hudson was Harriman State Park. The 3 young men were fishing when they spotted something strange in the sky over or near Lake Tiarati, deep in the Harriman Forest. Vincent said, "Suddenly a rare object of bronze color appeared, making no noise, and its size was approximately 6 meters in diameter." Vincent snapped 4 photos. Later, the U.S. Air Force Project Blue Book representatives did an investigation and quickly labeled the sighting photos a hoax. Later, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon studied the photos and interviewed the 3 men who witnessed the UFO event. NICAP investigators found no evidence of any hoax. Lastly, it should be noted that the Indian Point Nuclear Power Facility is just a mere 3 miles to the east of Lake Tiarati. The nuclear facility was ground zero for many high-visibility triangle and chevron UFO sightings in the 1970s and 80s. Dennis Sant, a husband and father of 5, had worked in local government for 17 years. He led a perfectly normal life. Then on March 17, 1983, Dennis's home in Brewster, New York, was the site of an extraordinary event. He said, "It was a very large object. The structure of it was very dark gray, metallic, almost girder-type looking. The object seemed to be very silent. The lights were iridescent, bright, and they stood out in the sky in three dimension. It looked like a city of lights. It just hung in the sky, all brilliant colors. We followed the object around to the backyard, and at that point a feeling of fright came upon me. Thoughts started to flood my mind. Thoughts of the craft touching ground, thoughts of an encounter with an alien being, thoughts of being abducted. All types of fearful thoughts started to enter into my mind. Dennis and his family were not the only ones mesmerized by the extraordinary light formation. A few miles away, traffic screeched to a halt on Interstate 84 as the mysterious object hovered overhead. The Hudson Valley sightings had only just begun. 1 week later, Officer Andy Sadoff of the Newcastle Police was on routine patrol when he too had an encounter. I was working a 4 p.m. to midnight tour and assigned to set up some radar to look for speeding cars, and I looked up into the sky and saw a series of lights. And at first I thought it was a plane. It was quite a distance, quite far away, but it was really quite large. As I recall, there were mostly white lights, but there were green lights also. It was alternating green and white lights. It approached my vehicle, and it stopped, and it seemed to hover, and I'm looking at this thing thinking, what is it? I wasn't afraid, I was just amazed. I was in awe of it. I didn't know what it was. The only thing that I recall the most is that I was amazed that there was no noise. There was no humming. There was no engine. There was no sound. It was absolutely silent. At virtually the same time, Ed Burns, a computer engineer and senior manager for IBM, was driving home on the Taconic Parkway, 10 miles north of Officer Sadoff's location. Ed described that out of nowhere, he got a lot of static on the radio. He thought maybe he was on the wrong station, and when he went to turn the dial again, that's when he looked up and saw the craft. In case anybody wants to know, back in the day, we didn't have digital radios in our vehicles. Some of them had the push buttons where it jumped the dial to different areas, and then you had to fine tune it in. You had the dial kind of radio in your vehicle. So sometimes you didn't quite have the station on properly, which is what he meant. So he saw the craft. It was a triangular ship, and the back had to be as large as a football field at least, and there was no noise. Ed pulled off the highway and joined a group of motorists by the side of the road. According to Ed, they were all staring at the sky, seemingly dumbstruck. He said, "I'm not into astronomy, but what I had witnessed that night was not from this planet." The eyewitness reports indicated the object was slowly moving north over the Hudson River Valley. Officer Sadoff and at least 12 others saw it in Newcastle. 10 minutes later, Ed Burns and at least 20 motorists saw it near Millwood. 10 minutes after that, the phones began ringing off the hook in the police station at Yorktown. Officer William Wolfe Jr. was the dispatcher on duty that night. He said, "Every line kept going, every single line, constantly answering the phone. Another line would light up. I'd answer the next line, and another one would light up. It got to the point the county parkway stopped. The people were out in their cars. It was starting to get really crazy. I tried calling the cars to find out if they saw anything, and the only one that called, Kevin, said that he would stop in." Officer Kevin Soravia arrived a few minutes later. He also saw the lights reported by dozens of Yorktown residents. The officer said, "The object was extremely large. I estimated it to be close to 300 to 400 yards wide. We stood out in front, facing to the north. and approximately about 5 minutes later, the object began to appear from the northern horizon. Although Officers Wolf and Soravia were standing side by side in front of the Yorktown police station, their accounts were entirely contradictory. Officer Soravia was convinced that he saw a large object with a number of small lights. He said it had approximately 16 or 18 lights, running in a V formation, approximately 200 to 400 yards wide. But Officer Wolf had a completely different impression. They looked like airplanes to me. I said, "Kev, I live near an airport and I see these airplanes every day." So as they were coming over, he said, "Well, you can't hear anything." I said, "Listen," but then he started to hear a drone. It wasn't one big solid unit, but if you looked at it for like a couple of minutes or even a fraction as it was coming over, I could see where some people would have gotten upset. The Hudson Valley sightings had taken a dramatic turn. It appeared that the UFOs were a hoax, nothing more than small aircraft flying in precise patterns. Anthony Capaldi was an air traffic control specialist at the time of the sightings. In the summer of 1983, he made an observation that seemed to settle the UFO controversy once and for all. The first time I observed the formation, it looked a little peculiar, and from our vantage point in the tower, they just appeared to be one big light because they were flying in tight formation. I don't think if this formation flew over an individual's head at 1,000 feet that there's any way you could mistake it for anything but the formation flying, due to the sound of the aircraft engines. And I imagine that at 1,000 feet, you could really determine that it's aircraft. But not everyone agreed. Philip Imbrogno, an author and UFO expert, spoke to several of the eyewitnesses, and he said, "The UFO was surely seen before these hoaxer pilots began their night flights. After these hoaxers began their night flights, people would call me up who had seen the UFO on previous dates and said, 'Well, I saw something strange in the sky, but it wasn't the same thing that I saw the week before.'" A home video showing a light formation above Brewster, New York, was taken on June 10, 1984, by local resident Bob Pozzuoli. Philip Imbrogno was convinced the footage showed an actual UFO. It has been looked at by a number of photographic experts who indicate that the movement of the object on the video seems to be one rigid object and not individual objects. Plus, there were hundreds and hundreds of witnesses who saw the UFO and said it was something strange. But the night that the airplanes were seen, there were also dozens of witnesses who said, in fact, that they did see airplanes. During the 7-year span of UFO sightings, many people also reported having some type of alien contact. Some described something similar to telepathic communication, and others talked about being physically abducted. There are still reports of strange flying objects in the Hudson River Valley. Perhaps when you're out hiking, you might want to look up and see if you see anything strange. If you get abducted, definitely let me know. But now we're going to go back to ghosts within the Harriman State Park. Alexandria Holzer, who was the daughter of famous paranormal investigator Hans Holzer, remembered that her father worked on a case at Harriman in the late 1960s. At dusk one night, her father spotted someone dressed as a soldier who was missing limbs and had glowing eyes. Alexandria said, "I guarantee if you went out there today, you will hear something or get something on footage," she said. "There are a lot of lost souls in that area." There was another account shared on a message board that read, "This happened on September 25th, 2005. I was up in the New York area visiting a friend, and we decided to make a quick overnight run into Harriman, old stomping grounds, north map and south. Over the years, a familiar place, simple plan, build a fire, catch up with said friend, and relax. Decided that the Bill Hill shelter was a good option as it's less than an hour hike up, and it was already 9 p.m. when we cruised off Seven Lakes Drive and onto Lake Welsh Drive to find a little hideaway parking spot just off to the right. First strange thing happened right after we parked. slung bags, and began hiking. This is a quick way up the mountain. When going this way, you just hike down the road you just drove up, hang left and off trail until you hit the Blue Blaze long path, then snake up to the shelter. From the car, we had to backtrack down the road before ducking into the woods on the left. While still on the road, I was startled when a woman emerged from the brush on my left flank and just about 10 yards ahead. As we passed her, the simple salutation from me to her was, "Good evening," because I felt any additional conversation might scare her in the presence of two guys at night in a dark wood. And as soon as we passed her, I looked at her face, which was illuminated by moonlight, and I tell you, she seemed very out of place. Here it was, almost 10 p.m. and up in the mountains, and this woman walked out of the woods by herself, past us, and proceeded on some journey all alone. I kept hiking a bit, but had to eventually turn around and look back. I had to take another look because I couldn't reconcile in my mind that she seemed so out of place. She didn't wear a backpack or a day bag, didn't have hiking boots, no rugged wear, not even a jacket, nothing of the sort. Of course, by the time I thought of all this and actually turned around, she wasn't there. Not even towards the horizon, which was lit up in the luminance of the low moon. "What the hell is someone like her doing out here this late?" I asked my friend. He suggested that she lived around here, and I thought that was silly, as we were in the center of the park. I also thought that was that. We had some hiking to do. Exit road left. As we approached Big Hill, we were invigorated by the hike, and we took in the 1,200-foot elevation air, proceeded to the shelter, and saw 3 bodies in there sleeping. This wasn't the best scenario, because the plan called for a trip up to the woods to hang out by the fire pit, be loud, and own the rock. It wasn't a big deal, though. We just set up about 40 feet away from the shelter, busted out food, beers for my friend, herbal essence for me, and an inferno blaze between us and the drop-off cliff. A pitch-black view when considering the proximity of extreme brightness from the fire. I want to get this straight, as it's relevant. I didn't drink that night. My friend did. I did smoke weed that night. My friend didn't. He's a regular drinker and can handle his beverage. I'm a regular smoker who can handle my smoke. And believe me, I was level-headed that night. As the night rolled out and it passed midnight and we started talking about how curious it was that the backpackers hadn't come out to say what's up, seeing as our fire was bright, and they should have heard us by then. We also laughed about it because being we were in the woods in the silence of dead night, they should have heard us even if we were whispering. Sound is so amplified out there. "Damn, those guys must be dead," we joked. Well, it's appropriate to get to the point right about now, because the unexplainable thing has to do with sound and amplification. I think we had pretty good buzzes going around 12:30 or 1 a.m., and the fire was dying out. My friend and I were definitely chilled out and discussing various topics, checking the canopy. That's when we both noticed something strange. I don't remember understanding what I heard the first time, and I suspect it may have made a sound a couple of times just seconds before I was aware of it, only much quieter. The sound came and went. It ran this cycle, which itself lasted less than a second each time. Like staccato stabs in the distance, this sound would emerge to a level where it was heard as an event, perhaps a mile away, somewhere far off in the park. Then it would go away faster, then immediately leaving total auditory absence. My friend and I were in mid-conversation, and I know we both heard it at first, and at the same time, because we stopped talking, got wide-eyed, and stopped to listen. I stood, faced the valley below, and tried to understand what this sound was, where it was coming from, and what to make of it all. So the sound is far off for about 2 minutes. My friend and I were hearing something curious and simultaneously frightening. The sound itself was coming in and out at an epileptic pace, and it seemed to roam over a large area in terms of the direction the sound reached our ears from. And it sounded like the agony of death, and most likely larger animals like horses. It was horrible, and quiet at a distance, then suddenly, immediately upon us. The sound was absolutely coming from less than 20 feet ahead of us, from the darkness in the valley below. This death sound emerged from the original pattern, and then singing began. When the singing began, the original sound of the death cry began to sound reversed, and it played in a loop and different volumes, and panned around us, still cutting in and cutting out. The singing, however, did sound like from where the original sound emerged, perhaps a mile away. And it was a choir of sorts, and my friend and I, at this point, arose from the silence we had kept. He asked me if I heard that, and I said, "Shh," and kept listening. The thing sounded evil, and here the connotation of evil is with traditional media depictions of dark topics, and I venture to say the Woods Night Choir. Male voices were prominent, and the harmonies were abstract chord structures with hypnotic progressions to lower minor keys. Sick, sick, sick. Then the singing, doing the whole flying around us, far off in the distance, right up close thing. Those two sounds, the singing and the reversed death screams, merged into a wild tribal tech drone of such unnerving, and after 3 minutes it silenced out. Nothing more. Friend and I conferenced for a minute. Both agreed that we had heard that, and that alcohol or weed didn't play a part in that experience. Both agreed that it did not sound human, and that if it was in fact human, we really didn't want to encounter the source. We looked over at the shelter, and those damn backpackers had slept through the entire thing. We packed up in 5 minutes and ran out of there in total darkness, on occasion shining a flashlight and to the front and to the rear, off trail, because it seemed we were being followed. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. I can answer questions, and I welcome any feedback or similar experiences elsewhere, or any experiences from Harriman. We're going to end part 1 of the Haunted Trail in New York here, and we're going to pick it up again next week. Remember, you can find Lurk wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and we're on all the major ones like Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, plus most of the minor ones as well. You can also find all of the episodes along with social media links on the website at lurkpodcast.com. If you have an interesting paranormal hiking story to share, please send it to me at lurkpodcast@yahoo.com. I'm working on collecting stories from other hiking areas, so if you have one, send it along. If you like what you hear, please tell your friends and consider giving us a 5-star review. And until next time, keep lurking.